was early.
And we have one from Councillor Lovett for lateness. Can we move in a seconder for that, please? Councillor Brum, Councillor McMillan, all in favour, please say aye. Carried. Any extraordinary business? I know of none. Councillor Lane? Right. Declarations of interest on today's agenda. Councillor Floon.
Yeah, I'll be standing out of agenda items 15 and 17 due to conflict.
Thank you. And the confirmation of the minutes on page 3, item number 4. Any alterations or additions on page 3? Page 4? Page 5? Page 6? And 7? My little paper copies lining up with your Stella's.
Yep.
We'll move in a second. Councillor McMillan, Councillor Cameron, all in favour, please say aye. Aye. Carried. Thank you. Receipt of the minutes of the Youth Council. Page 8. Move in a second that we receive the minutes of the 14th of April Youth Council meeting.
I'd like to move that.
Rawlinson, Councillor Cameron, all in favour, please say aye. Aye. Carried. Item number 6, reports. There's nothing in that Youth Council we need to address, I don't think, is there?
Could I make a comment on Neil Alombro's report?
Yep.
He was a past councillor and has left to go to uni, but his report on the environment and the biodiversity study was really well received, and I think for a long time people in the community have been trying to involve youth in these sorts of things, and I think from this report it will go forward in a really positive way. He's really positive about helping the group, even though he's not part of it, to lead them through all of this. So I think it's a good move.
Yeah, there's some suggestions in there for the way forward, which is good.
It's a good report.
Great. Item number 6, council appointment to the Refugee Resettlement Steering Group. And Janice is here for this one. Anything further to add to your report, Janice? If not, we can just go to questions for clarification. If not, we have a recommendation there. Councillor McMillan.
Thank you. I would like to move the recommendation that Council appoints Councillor Cameron to chair the Ashburton Refugee Resettlement Steering Group.
Councillor Brum, seconded.
I'm happy to second it.
Okay, it's an important committee, a new committee, important, and in debate that now, if need be, meets 4 times a year. I think Councillor Cameron will be a very good candidate for it, as we have our first lot of refugees arriving at the end of this month now, I think, isn't it? Yeah, in May, so very timely, and I think Councillor Cameron will do a great job there. I'm going to put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against? Carried. Thank you. Item number 7. Proposed consent conditions, Craycroft stockwater consent, and Mr. Guthrie's here. Any questions or clarification? Councillor Wilson.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. I think it just shows how weak ECAN are.
Councillor Wilson, can we have questions and we'll hold that for debate?
Well, my question is, you recommend that we don't. Is it not a case of one of local government standing up and saying, look, enough is enough?
So my recommendation is based primarily or principally on the fact that our position in this particular case is quite weak. We are currently not able to operate under the consent we have in our hand, and we have been given latitude by the consenting agency to operate the way we are currently operating. If we were in a stronger position, the recommendation would be different. And I think I've outlined some of the risks around it, the other alternative.
Councillor Falloon, questions?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Is this a sort of a backward step in a way? Because I presume at the moment with the consents we have for the actual stock water races to directly take water from the river, they are not subject to low flow conditions because it is stock water?
Yeah, correct. So if we were able to extract water from the Craycroft intake infrastructure, there would be no issue. But as a result of the issues we had with that intake back in December and January last year, that decision to retire that intake came about at that stage. It was going to be too expensive to try and reinstate it.
Councillor Mackay, questions?
Question, if I may, Mr Mayor, and good afternoon, everyone. My question is, ECAN has given us permission with low flow conditions because we are taking water through another intake. What is the name of that other intake?
So the current arrangements are via the RDR intake.
So the RDR intake is being used to take water for electricity and irrigation,
Yes.
and we are going to add this to that intake consent
That's correct.
to take stock water.
It won't be physically added to the consent or their consent. It'll
be our
consent. Yeah.
Our consent. Question, if water left over from the stock water consent is still in the RDR, which it will be, what can it be used for?
I don't know. I don't know how you can deal with that.
Could it be used for irrigation or could it be used for electricity?
Potentially, if it's unused for us, it would be going elsewhere.
Thank you.
This, I think, has probably come around about because of the principles of Te Mana o Te Wai. First principle is looking after the well-being of the water bodies and freshwater ecosystems. The second, the health needs of the people. And the third is the ability of people and communities to provide for their social, economic and cultural well-being. So stock fits in either the second or the third one. It doesn't mention stock at all, but perhaps it should. And it probably should be up in the first one because they're as important as a fish or a plant or whatever else that the water is used for. And it might be an oversight, but should we as council do that, test it or not, I'm not sure. But my question is, it probably comes back to Te Mana o Te Wai, which is causing this.
Yeah, so if I may, so when I wrote the report, or when I was at least dealing with this issue, we were as intrigued as officers to see this come through, this consent condition come through. And when I queried the matter, the answer I was given at that stage, and that's some months ago, was that the difference was the recent arrival of the MPS and the changes, and this concept of Te Mana o Te Wai. It's interesting that apparently an ECAN staff member has read this report a few days ago, and I've been advised, oh no, the primary concern was the water conservation order on the Rangitata. They've defaulted back to that, which doesn't have any provision for stock water in the conservation order, and they are simply applying the low flow conditions set out in the water conservation order.
So it's the water conservation order that's causing this, not Te Mana o Te Wai.
That's what I've heard most recently. It appears to be one of the primary drivers.
Hamish?
Just for council's information, so the concept of Te Mana o Te Wai, which is essentially an the mana of the water trumps all other things, and therefore the priority order that we see on the in Andy's report is a concept that will be familiar to mana whenua, but less familiar in a wider context. And it is appearing in legislation and regulation for the first time. And so it appears in the NPS for essential fresh water. It appears now in the legislation giving or creating Te Mata Arawai, the new drinking water regulator, where they must give effect to this concept. And one of the challenges to new concepts is to understand how they apply in a wider setting. But it's not probably for council to query the manner in which that concept is described in this report. That is how the concept is articulated by mana whenua, and therefore that is what it means. And we don't have the opportunity to, if you like, amend or consider that this might be incorrect. That this is what the concept means, and the concept is finding its way into legislation and regulation. And more we are going to see an obligation to give effect to the concept, and this is the first time we've really come across it in a rubber hits the road kind of way.
Councillor Falloon.
Thank you. A couple of pragmatic questions. One, is there a cost in decommissioning the Craycroft intake?
So there's been a temporary decommissioning of the facility. I mean, it was pretty much decommissioned by nature initially, but since then we've taken steps to ensure that if the old race got flooded, it wouldn't then continue down the old race system and flood private property. So there's been some temporary works done in that regard. And as recently as yesterday, I received an email about some upcoming work to make that permanent. Just to ensure that we don't cause any issues with the landowners in the area.
Second question, one presumes with the closure of that intake there will be some surplus races. Are those on council-owned land or are they on private land? And if they're on private land, will they be offered back to the owners or given back to the owners, or what's the story there?
Yeah, so I can't remember where that's landed, but the intention was to formalise a race closure of the section involved. I recollect it being about 6 to 8 kilometres long, and it's all main race. So yeah, all of that land would become available to the landowner to do with as they wish.
Councillor Wilson.
Thanks, Mr Mayor. I believe the council already has a consent to take stock water through the RDR out at Klondike. Well, we got enough capacity there to forget about extra water? How much water we take there, and do we use it 100%?
Yeah, the existing arrangements we have with the RDR agreement are slightly complicated in that we have an ongoing volume of water that you talk about, the Craycroft, the Klondike. Unfortunately, access to the other portions of that water under the agreement relate to particular events like a drought or what have you. So we can take more water for stock during certain periods. But I can't remember the exact nature of the conditions under which that would kick in. But it's all spelt out in the RDR agreement that we have with them.
Supplementary, you don't really know how much permanent stock water we've got through the RDR at Klondike.
I don't know what it is on an ongoing basis. The maximum, I think, is around 790 litres a second overall. But you have to remember that's for potentially other race takes across the whole length of the RDR.
The RDR knows what stock water is taken on a daily basis, and it is recorded. Councillor Rawlinson.
Okay. Because of our stock water closure plan, will this new low flow restriction, if it's needed, really have a big impact?
No, I've indicated in the report that the way we're operating this particular location, we're operating well below the maximums anyway. You will recollect that it's actually the currently unused portion of this consent is what is being, which is facilitating the MAR project. So MAR is the one that it would be impacted worst by this. It's also worth noting that MAR already have a low flow condition in their consent.
Thank you.
Councillor Flynn?
Thank you. If the races are offered back to the landowners, whose cost will it be to fill those races in so that land is usable again? Councils or the landowners?
We typically tend to walk away from the race systems on private property. In some cases where races are on land, on road reserve, we will have that discussion with the roading team and work out exactly what function they want for the residual. Sometimes they're converted into a swale.
Councillor Mackay?
Oh, when you're ready, I'd be willing to move.
Okay, I'll take that. Seconder? Councillor, well, did you have a question? No, you second. Now debating. Councillor Mackay.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I asked the questions I did before for a reason. The stock water in the future is going to be taken through a commercial water take mechanism at the start of the RDR, and will end up going through one of the most elaborate fish screens that the world has probably ever seen. Therefore, in my considered opinion, ECAN has taken the right view on going back to the conservation order, which is a document actually moved by Parliament. The Governor-General actually signs it, so therefore it's a very high document. If the water had continued to be taken at Craycroft, yes, the stock then, in my opinion, have full rights to stock water with no low flow. But I thought that Mr. Guthrie put it very well that in answering my questions, that when he agreed that the surplus water could be used for irrigation, might be, not necessarily, certainly most likely be used for electricity, because it drops into the Rikaya through a power station. And I can't see Trustpower giving up the opportunity to produce electricity with it. So I actually believed ECAN have been good in granting us the consent and worked through the simplest mechanism they possibly could, and that is the National Conservation Order, which is signed by the Governor-General. So that gives it a very high priority and would guard the stock water in the future. This, in my opinion, is a much better way to supply stock water than an independent system running throughout the plains. I also, Mr. Chief Executive, if I can comment further, I enjoyed the staff members' comments about doing something about the main race, so water couldn't flow down it. You've heard me before. If person A has surplus flood water, they should not put it in a race and send it down country to some poor other unsuspecting person who probably doesn't have a way of getting rid of it. So I think, Mr. Chief Executive, your staff are right on the button here, and I agree totally with the way ECAN has given us this consent on the basis of the National Water Conservation Order. It's the highest document they can do it with. Thank you.
I support the motion, and because there'll be no real effect on the stock, the water, there will still be enough water there if the river gets down to that level, and history shows it doesn't get down that level. But I'm concerned about the precedent this is setting, where stock water drops below other uses, because if the stock don't have water, they die. They don't die a pleasant death. So it's the precedent this is setting, but I will be voting in favour. But I think that precedent needs to be changed by someone higher up the line than the Ashburton District Council. So it could be taken up elsewhere, and I might do that. But for this instance, I'll be supporting. Councillor Wilson.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. If ECAN are using the conservation order as their reason for coming up with this report, in fact, the conservation order allows us to take water below the minimums. So they're not really sticking to the wording of the conservation order, are they? They're altering it.
The advice I've been given, and certainly it looks like the quoted sections from the Water Conservation Order appear to be the basis for the condition they've used. Apparently, history tells us that the Rakaia Water Conservation Order had specific provision for stock water. There was a specific clause that protected stock water in the Rakaia Water Conservation Order. Apparently, there is nothing equivalent in the Rangitata Water Conservation Order.
No further speakers. Right, a reply.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Mayor, through all this, I believe it was our choice, the Ashburton District Council's choice, to change the intake point on the river. Am I correct? We changed it from stock water only to a take that also has irrigation and electricity water in it. Once we changed that take point, I believe that ECAN has handled this correctly, and I think you would be pushing it, even if you did go to a higher authority, to get the same conditions from a private water race, which the RDR is, than a natural water race. Yes, you're quite right, where there's a natural river, you take the stock water from it, they have a high priority. As soon as you take it through another intake and another structure, another ownership structure, I think ECAN's got it right. So I'd just go a wee bit careful. Maybe if you're going to ask the questions, I'd ask them softly. I urge councillors to vote for this because we did change the point of take as a council.
I'm going to put the motion. I'm in favour. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against? Carried. Abstained?
Yes, I
Good.
understand.
Do you want that recorded, Councillor Wilson? We're now going to move to the Spark presentation, and we have Leela Gentman coming in by Zoom, and she's going to talk to us about some changes on the copper network. We're running, yeah. Just while we're waiting for that, Hamish, the council staff did a seminar yesterday on pathways, and I went down and had a look at it at the Network Centre and talked to some people down there, and then the 1,500 kids from the schools, the high schools were there, and talked to some of them and the people presenting, and then later that evening there was Nigel Latter there who gave a presentation on bringing kids up, and at the end of it, it was very, very well done, and I'd like you to congratulate your staff who organised it, because it was the comments I've heard was one of the best things this council has done.
Brilliant, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll certainly pass that on to a wide number of our staff that were involved, and they will very much appreciate council's comments. Thank you.
I'll make a comment as well. I also attended, but I also had 2 children from Mountain Hart College that attended, and I had a look around and agree it was really well run by the council and YMCA in the evening as well, and just to get 1,500 students through EA Networks facility in a really well-mannered, timely manner was really good. And I talked to quite a few of the stallholders who said that they were really impressed with how it was run, but also really impressed with the children as well. So my son now wants to be a builder.
Yeah, we get the nickname Bob.
And just if I may add, Mr. Mayor, I spoke to the principal of Ashburton College last evening, and he was equally full of praise for the event, and He described the buzz and the kids as they came back from the A Network Centre and the Pathways event was really lively and excited and interested and positive, and he noted that not everything the school does with their kids is always like that, and it was a fantastic event, and he was delighted with the support it had been given.
And if it helps retain the kids in the district to work here and live here, it's very successful, and that's wanting to be one of the outcomes of it. So great, well done. There you go, Ashburton.
Could I suggest, Mr. Mayor, that we move on with the agenda while the technical issues continue to be examined?
Let's move on to item number 8, Local Government Rating of Whanau Maori Amendment Act. Paul?
Through Mr. Mayor, this is just simply here for your information. This is a new amendment to the Local Government Rating Act. It doesn't have a lot of impact on us in Ashburton. There are a couple of key changes though. The Chief Executive is given the power to write off rates, not just rates, Māori land rates, but all rates. If it's deemed that they're not collectible, then the Chief Executive must write them off. There's some provision for writing off Maori freehold land and to make unused Maori, not freehold land, unused Maori land non-rateable. And it's designed to actually free up this land to actually become more productive, because it's seen as a burden if there are unpaid rates sitting on these bits of land, which can add up. But there's very little land in our district that this applies to. So this report is really only there for your information. It does impact some councils quite markedly that have large amounts of Maori land.
Yep, questions for Paul. There's two things going on here. One is to write off the rates on Maori land, and also giving the Chief Executive the right to write off rates on all land.
That's correct.
So there's two things going on here,
Yes.
not just one. Yeah. Stuart.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. The Maryland site in Rakai, is it actually got a house on it, or is it just unused land, or what's the position with it?
I think it's a vacant section, it's unused, and it's never had rates paid on it.
And a supplementary question, who is initiating the idea that the Chief Executive could forgive rates over and above our decisions?
The staff will recommend to the Chief Executive that the rates are uncollectible, and if the Chief Executive agrees with that, then the Chief Executive will write them off, authorise the write-off, not council.
Where's it come from? Government has it, not local government New Zealand, be government decision, is it?
Well, this is actually contained in this amendment, giving the Chief Executive that power. So clearly this has been raised somewhere, and in this Amendment Act they've given the Chief Executive power to write off general rates, not just rates on Maori land. So it won't be coming to council. If it's deemed to be uncollectible, then the Chief Executive must write them off.
A supplementary, we've got no right to say no to this directive then?
No.
There's probably two parts to this, though, isn't there? For the Maori land write-offs, the answer is no, but for the Chief Executive to write the rates off, there is a yes there if we don't agree with it.
Won't be coming, Mr. Mayor, won't be coming to council to make that decision. If the Chief Executive deems that it's not collectible, then he or she must write them off. It's being given to the Chief Executive level to make that call. Now, the Chief Executive will look at whether it's not collectible or not, make that call.
What process is there now for that to happen?
The process now would be that the rating staff would raise the issue with the Chief Executive, making the case that it's not collectible, and the Chief Executive would make a decision whether that information is sufficient for him to make the call or not.
But at the moment, the council must decide to write them off, or not.
At the moment, write-offs are reported through to council, but this is clarifying that it's not the council that will make the decision.
So I'll go to the Chief Executive. It's not quite what I asked, but
If it gives council some comfort as to how the new found powers might be exercised, there would be the same level of due diligence on the uncollectability of rates that the Chief Executive here will require, as if it was to be a report and recommendation to council. So there's no less work or gravitas to the situation, and that it would be sparingly and carefully applied.
And gets reported to council as well.
I have no problem doing that as an item of advice to council. I'm happy with that.
Councillor Flynn?
Just a couple of points of clarification. First one is, one presumes this Act only applies to land which has always been customary Maori land or freehold Maori land.
That's correct.
Does not apply if land has ever been bought off someone of any other race. Is there a definition anywhere, and what is it up to council as to what is the definition of unused land, and is it up to the landowner to apply for an unused land definition, or is it up to council to determine that land is unused?
So, Mr. Mayor, that's a bit unclear. But if we know that it is unused and it falls into the category of Maori land, then we will make it non-rateable. And so the Rakai one we know about, we will make it non-rateable. For other councils that have a lot of it, if they haven't identified it, it may well be that one of the owners identifies it to council and says this meets the definition, and then a council would make it non-rateable. The fact is that trying to track down owners is the reason that this land is sitting there attracting rates with no one being paid. So we've identified ourselves which bits of land this actually applies to, and we'll make the required one non-rateable.
Just following that, I recall reading probably in the last 2 to 3 months what I found to be a really informative piece in the press. The weekend press had a very fulsome and helpful explanation of the impediments to the development of Māori land, in this case at Tuahiwi, just out of Kaiapoi. And if you had a mind to and could locate that piece online through the press several months ago now, but it actually put in context the impediments and difficulties of developing for best use some of the land that has been held in as Maori land because of the complications around ownership and the authorities that are hard to find, etc., etc. So I think this is intended as a way of actually enhancing the capacity to utilise land that otherwise seems to get dreadfully tangled up in red tape.
Just a question for Paul. The golf course land, Ashburton Golf Course, do they pay a rental to the iwi? So we're not collecting rates on it at the moment. Oh, it is.
They get 50%.
Oh, yeah. The land at Rakai, the section, could anyone or who could build a house on that section?
Mine is 2 units. At the moment, I'm not sure anybody can because the ownership is in multiple names. So there'd have to be some mechanism to be able to do that.
Yeah. Makes it difficult. Councillor Miller?
I was just going to move the motion
Right.
if there were no other questions.
Seconder, Councillor Rawlinson. Open for debate. Councillor Mackay.
So this is an amendment to an Act of Parliament, and this item, Mr Mayor, tells us what the future is going to be. I'm trying to work out why I actually have to receive it as a councillor, other than an information item. I think this shows the government's true intent of taking democracy out of local government, as well as the health boards. Good luck to them. I hope centralisation still delivers for those areas that are out of Auckland, Wellington, Christchurch and Dunedin.
Right, a reply, Councillor McMillan. We'll put the motion. I'm in favour. All in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against? Carried. Thank you. Spark are not coming in today. We couldn't get that connection right, so we'll probably take them in 2 weeks' time. Question to ask in 2 weeks' time. Item number 9, proposed local government New Zealand remit around fireworks. And this is supporting the Wamakariri District Council councillors' recommendation. Councillor Philip Redmond has proposed remit. Questions? It'll give them the ability to take that remit to the local government New Zealand conference. Councillor Graham.
If there are no questions, I'm quite happy to push the recommendation as it stands.
It's seconded. Councillor Rawlinson.
I second it because I totally support it.
Any further debate, discussion? I'll put the motion. I'm in favour. All in favour, please say aye. Against? Carried. Item number 10. The Mayor's Report. And the Mayor's Report there, if there's any questions, I'll just give you an update on the presentation to Environment Canterbury long-term plan yesterday. Myself and Councillor McMillan went up and presented. We talked about added to the submission we put in and told them that we weren't happy with options 1 or 2 and that option 3, which was using the loan funding through intergenerational equity, we discussed that with them. We also talked about the use of the UAGC and using it more rather than the capital value tool, which they seem to use, and disagreed with their assumption that the current policy that properties with a higher capital value have an increased ability to afford higher rates. So we mentioned that is not the case. And we told them what types of things we have UAGCs on, which is the library, the museum, the public toilets, community safety, at Paulin Stadium and emergency management, which we have UAGCs on. We told them we supported the Hekio Hines Mar project to meet the plan change 2 of the 6.9 milligrams in their water. We supported that on rating. We also told them about their consultation in general, and we were disappointed that there were no community meetings in the Ashburton District led by Environment Canterbury to put their plan out there. And it was quite a 24% increase is above the norm, and they did not come here to explain to the people of this district that they put the paper out like we do, but there was no explanation, no question, no time for questioning, so we told them we were disappointed in that. And we also talked and thanked them for the monies they give us for total mobility and the bus service that Councillor McMillan is involved in, and thanked them for that. So that pretty much wraps it up. I think Councillor McMillan was there. If you needed to add anything I've missed.
No, that was pretty much it. We had 10 minutes and I don't think we even spoke for that long. It was, the councillors were allowed 2 questions each to us, and I think there were 2 on transport and then there was another one on Mar, was that correct? I can't remember that.
I think it was. It was Councillor Mackenzie at the...
Yeah.
Yeah. That, but answered it, so it must have been okay.
Pretty, yeah.
It was good. We got them back on time anyway because it started to run a wee bit late. Councillor Cameron.
Just a quick question, Neil. Did they respond to your comment with regards to consultation?
No, we're
Did
not
they
there.
make a commitment to improve their consultation in future years?
No, they won't. Well, they won't at that hearing. They were there to listen to us, as you'll find here. We listen to the
Yeah.
people that will come to us. When they do their deliberations, then they should talk about it, and then they should come back to us with an answer.
An answer
But
to
not
that, yeah.
not at that
Oh, I
appropriate
understand
at that
that,
time.
yeah, I just would be interested if there's
I'd
anybody.
like to, they should
Yeah.
respond back to us later, after they've deliberated and made decisions. So that's good. No further questions there. One thing front of mind which I wanted to raise with councillors, it's not in here, but it's the district logo. It is gaining a reasonable amount of attraction around the country, and even locally. We've had, I think Saturday's paper Guardian was mentioned in there that you're all against it, except one councillor. who
Well,
never had
I
a-
wasn't asked my view, so
never
I
had a view. but-
didn't have a view. And that was my question. Is it a district logo or is it a town logo?
What I'd like to ask you now is, what do you want to do? Would you like a report to come to council suggesting we do something or do nothing, or what would you like? Councillor Lickham.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. You may note in that Guardian report, my first question was, do we need one? And I think that should be the first question, because personally, I don't think it makes the slightest bit of difference. It's just window dressing and a bit of nice, fluffy, woolly things. But if the general population or the majority think we should have one, I'm happy to go with the flow. But I really don't think we need one.
And I think that's the first question, and that'll determine whether we have one or not. So, Councillor Cameron.
I have the contrary view. I most certainly do think we need one, but I also think we need Welcome to Ashburton, gateway to whatever at the front, at the north end and the south end of the town. I think we need to rebrand, if you like, and consistently send out messages about the vibrancy of our town and what a wonderful place it is to live and learn and, experience Mid-Canterbury. So I think we definitely do need one. And,
Town or district?
well, I think probably district would be my, but that's not without too much thought, but I think district. And I definitely do think we need one, personally, yeah.
Okay, Councillor Rawlinson.
Two questions. The first one is, who decided the last one? Was it done by the council or driven by council?
I think
Or
it was Grow Mid-Canterbury came up with it.
Okay, and my second one was more of a view too. I don't know whether we need a logo, but I definitely agree with Councillor Cameron that we need some branding at either end of our town, but I think it's got to encompass the whole district, whatever it is.
Whatever it takes.
Yeah, I know.
Councillor Lovett.
No, I actually got caught on the hop, and I was trying to back a camper van, and it was the first thing that came in my head to me that got reported. But I've just come from a meeting of a room full of 60-odd ladies, and it was a big discussion at our table with Neil Stewart's wife. And we all feel, the feeling there is we need a logo of some description, but the LTP has got something in there about Ashburton, the district of choice, whether we just pick up that, but that and just have it there. But I just don't want to see us going to consultants and spending a lot of money over it. I don't think it's worth it.
Yeah, Councillor Brown.
I've got a good one. I've got one at all, and we don't really have to spend any money. Ashburton, a bridge too short.
Councillor Falloon.
I certainly agree that it needs a revamp. We need something that invokes what the district contributes as far as our lives are concerned. Whatever it takes has been around for too long. We'll know we'll always do whatever it takes, but to me the whole thing needs a total revamp, and the only way to do that, I believe, is to put it out to the public and get some feedback from them.
Hamish or Carolyn.
Just one more remark. Neil, I listened to your interview on the radio yesterday, and I note you were talking about job vacancies and how we're desperately in need of, extra people in the district. And I think if we had a town that represented, that had an image and a nice logo, nice entranceway, nice everything, and we could communicate that clearly to people, then I think we'd be more attractive to employees as well. So it's another.
Hamish, to move this forward, I think there's a will around the table to do something. To move it forward, what do we need to do? As in, from the staff side, a report of some description?
Yes, we're certainly able to provide some sort of report. What would be helpful is that the motion that might be about to come from council could be as specific as possible, particularly in the language of the motion, because there's a difference, for example, between a logo and a slogan. There's differences between the town of Ashburton and the overall district. There's a whole host of things that are very open to a wide-ranging interpretation by the lucky person charged with writing the report. And if we could have as much direction from council as possible as to what it is that you're wanting a report on, then that would be most helpful. But we're certainly happy to provide a report that would advance the consideration.
I'm just thinking now, if we have a short workshop to determine that, all the ideas will come out and that could feed in to a recommendation from there to come back to council in a workshop form.
Yes, no, we're happy to do that. Could I be bold enough to make a suggestion that, given the public interest in the matter, that the workshop be at least open to the public? This is a matter of high public attention. It would be good to keep the public as informed as possible through the process, rather than just sort of appearing at the end of a tunnel with something.
So, for keeping it public, as people sit at watch at home, we'll have the live feed on while we're having the workshop.
Yep.
That's
what at least the media will be able to attend. It could be live streamed if we wish.
We haven't got the room to fit 100 people in here.
No, that's what I meant by being open.
Okay.
Yeah.
Councillor Cameron.
I was going to suggest that we could go to the youth council, could bring it up and discuss it at the youth council, and they can go and consult with their fellow youth. We could go out and have focus groups. We could have clinics in the town where we could sit out on a table and get messages of what people feel and reflect their values of the town.
Could I respectfully suggest that all of that could emerge from the workshop?
Yep.
Okay, sure.
Great stuff for the workshop to bring it up. Yeah, Councillor Millen, moving something.
I'm not moving anything, but I do think, and I don't know whether this would be, well, I think it should be decided now whether it's a district or a town logo, as that will make quite a big difference. And everyone, all the other councillors have talked about the entrances to the town. They haven't talked about the entrances to the district. So I'm presuming everyone's thinking that it's a town logo.
Would we not decide that in the workshop?
Well, possibly.
I think the best place for that decision would be the workshop, because we are hearing the words logo used a lot, and a logo is quite different from a slogan. Whatever it takes is a slogan. A logo, i.e. some sort of pictorial demonstration of what Ashburton District means to all of us. I'm not aware that thing even exists now. I think where the interest has come is from the slogan, whatever it takes. And I think we need a little bit of time to prepare for a discussion with you about some of those terms and words, because otherwise we're going to be perhaps talking about different things and getting different understandings from them.
Roger?
Thank you, Neil. It has to be the district, in my opinion, because that's who we represent. So whatever it is, it'll be Ashburton District, Heart of the Mainland, or whatever. So I thought I'd just get that one in.
One bridge short. Angus?
Can I move?
We haven't got a motion yet, but do we...
Can I move?
Yes, you can.
I move that the Ashburton District Councillors hold a workshop to consider promotion of the district or not. Or not.
Or development of a logo for the district. Your promotion.
That's okay, I'll put up a motion, I'll leave it as it is.
Righto. The motion is as you said. Just re-say it.
That we hold a workshop on the promotion of the district or not.
Promotion of the district.
Yeah. Shall we have a motion? Do we have a second?
I've given you the we have a workshop, and I've given you the title of the workshop.
Yeah. Not sure. I think the title might be not quite right.
Okay.
But is there a seconder for that?
Right.
Well, if you want to second it, then it becomes the motion. If we don't second it, we could have another motion. Or if you didn't second it, then it lapses and then a new motion could come along with new wording. I'm not seeing a seconder, so it's lapped. Do you have a motion, Councillor Rawlinson? I'll put you, hang on, Angus have to go off. There we go.
I'd scribbled some notes too, that the council undertakes a workshop to discuss the rebranding of the Ashburton district, and by the way of replacing our existing logos.
Probably stop at the rebranding of the district. The rebranding, is that the right word? It's not. We don't have a brand there, so we can't rebrand
That
it.
was why I was adding on, it's by way of looking at our logos and renewing them. That's where the
We still haven't
direction I
got
was
the
trying to
wording
take.
right.
No,
Yeah, we just haven't got the wording right.
If at the risk of crossing into the wrong area, would it be appropriate to have a motion along the lines of to have a workshop to examine the existing slogan and associated matters, and then that can spin where it wants to, but it's focused on
Broad
on
enough.
whatever it takes. I mean that's the byline.
That's the motion. Can we have a mover for that?
I'll move that.
Right. Caroline moved and John seconded. Caroline, speaking to it.
Yes, I don't believe we don't have a brand just because we don't have something written down. I think we all have a perception and we all have a brand. But I think the idea of a workshop is an excellent idea, and I think it's much needed for a whole multitude of reasons. So
Anyone speaking to the motion? If not, we'll put it. I'm in favour. All in favour, please say aye. Get that carried. Workshop to be set up in the next. We will do whatever it takes to get one. Correct. Can we move it that we received the Mayor's report? If there's no further discussion on the Mayor's report, Councillor Brown. Moved.
Move it.
I'll second it.
Councillor Rawlinson, all in favour, please say aye. Carried. Councillor Mackay.
I actually had my light on before you moved.
Oh,
That's
sorry.
all right.
I can go back.
Because the Chief Executive's name is mentioned in the Mayor's report, I was going to ask, does the Chief Executive have anything he wishes to report as a Chief Executive?
Is that on the council workshop, Three Waters presentation? Okay.
No.
I understand the question.
Yes. No. I'm nothing further at this stage, Councillor.
Councillor Wilson?
Yes, item 10.2, local government review. Have you or Hamish got any comment to make? Because this is going to be mind-changing. If some of the people I've seen on the auxiliary committee, I can't believe that they've been put on, not the actual advisory committee, but they've got subcommittees sort of. And some of the people on those subcommittees, how on earth the local government minister decided to put them on, I've got no idea.
Well, she did, but Hamish, could you talk us?
Briefly, Mr. Mayor. So there's been a lot of discussion, and I think including around this table, that there is such extensive reform in the pipeline. If you think about Three Waters and the RMA, perhaps in particular, that the manner in which councils will go about whatever is council business in the future is clearly under consideration. One of the things that many in the sector have been advocating for the last 18 months or so has been that there should be an overarching consideration of the future for local government that in an ideal world would actually lead these other reforms as opposed to coming along later. And so a number of people have been of the view that this review is long overdue, that in considering how councils will operate and what services they'll provide and whether there is a moment in time where the focus on infrastructure is to change, and if that is true, then is it changing to a more community wellbeing focus? That should be a conversation that central government has with local government, with iwi, and with all our communities as to what that might look like. And that review has finally crystallised into the announcement the Minister made a couple of weeks ago. It feels slow in relation to all the other reforms, but I guess better late than never, and we're very much looking forward to that review getting underway. I think we can say here in Canterbury we're fortunate that the panel chair, Mr. Jim Palmer, who was the former chief executive of the Waimakariri District Council, is well known to us, and his accessibility to Canterbury and Canterbury councils and mayors will be, I'm confidently predict, will be first rate, and that he will lead that panel well. Where it leads, of course, is now an open question, but it's really timely to think of what role will local government have to support our communities, given all the other reforms that are going on across the country, and in essence, or in a sense, where does local democracy sit? How do locally elected councils support their community? We know the Minister was very positive about the role that councils right across New Zealand played through the COVID lockdown, in a manner in which we were able to support communities on the ground that assisted central government with their ambitions for New Zealand. And so let's have a talk about all that, and no doubt funding will be part of that conversation as we consider perhaps a different or a changed focus for local government beyond the next couple of years. So personally, I think we should welcome the review, and we look forward to it providing some real and lasting clarity for the local government sector in New Zealand.
Councillor McKay?
Are we debating?
You could ask questions.
Ask a question. Okay.
We don't debate with the staff.
Okay. Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. Councillors, my question is that I think we could agree with Councillor Wilson, could we not? Because silly bedtime, TV watching, I watched the Prime Minister answer a question last night on the consultation versus the rights of the Maori Health Authority under the new health reforms of veto or not to veto. I've also, in my young days, watched a program called Yes Minister, and in that documentary it was very clear that a minister must always work out what he or she wants first, so they can select the right advisors to be on their advisory panel to give them the right advice that the minister wants in the first place, because otherwise it could undo the bureaucracy system. So I think the government has actually been very studious in the way that they've handled this, and I think it will be very much like the water reforms and the series of committees that our previous government had that have sort of formed the basis that maybe this district is struggling because it uses water in such an efficient manner to create food, exports, taxes for a welfare system that keeps New Zealand going. So I think this government's actually been very astute in the way they've put this together, and I don't think I'm going to like the result, and I don't think the people of Ashburton will like the result, but it is what it is.
And we'll await that result, because it's still a couple of years away from getting to that that place, but we will be involved on the way through. So that's the Mayor's report, moved and seconded and passed. So we'll move on to, before we go to Bancorp, we might go to item number 11, the Deputy Mayor's report. Take it as read, or any questions of the Deputy Mayor? Been very busy. Could we move? I'll move that we receive the Deputy Mayor's report. Seconder, Councillor Cameron. All in favour, please say aye. Aye. Carried.
You didn't see my name.
I can't see your light, that's off. We have the Treasury Report here now. Rachel, do we want to go through the Treasury Report we have in our agenda, or go straight to the screen? Because one probably overlaps the other, I think.
If we can just go straight into the presentation,
Okay,
that would be
great.
wonderful. Just give me a second to pop it up.
Yep, and we welcome Miles O'Connor from Bancorp. Welcome. Good to see you. And yeah, you've got a presentation there. So we'll go through that and we'll take questions at the end, councillors. The floor is yours when you're ready. Miles, we just, before we get that up, in the report we've got here, I think there was a version 1 and version 2 and something changed. If you could just explain what the change was.
Change in the graph. I just saw there was an error in a number. It didn't actually make any difference to the policy compliance. It was the graph on, if I remember rightly, the report on page 8. So the graph, so that the one of the lines was slightly in error, and I just corrected the number in it yesterday.
Yeah, the last page, page 50, councillors. Is that in between two red lines, that graph?
It's the green line, yes.
It's the green line.
Yeah, that just changed slightly.
Right, but still sits within the two lines.
Was then. I'll explain something in the presentation.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
Yep. Thank you.
Sorry, we're having a few IT issues.
Councillor, you actually have the PowerPoint on your tablets. Yep. Do you want to bring that up, and we can look at it? If you've, we have it on our tablets.
Okay.
The
But if you want to
presentation.
keep trying, and what Miles could start, or you work off the same computer. Yeah, it's called Highlight Bancorp.
So that's the presentation.
Yeah, and or I can pull it up on here for you as well.
We all getting it. Shouldn't have done that. Bancorp PowerPoint. Okay. Everyone got it? Yep. So we're looking at now, Miles, the Treasury presentation page, overview of Bancorp Treasury Services. Yeah, we have. Yep.
Thank you.
Oh. Look at Angus's. Yeah.
Are we all good?
You keep trying, Rachel, but we can press on.
Okay, shall I start?
Yeah, thanks, Miles.
Thank you, Your Worship, for having me here. Just before I start, I just thought I'd say one thing. Hamish, you'll be pleased to see that I'm not in jail. The very quick story was Hamish was the moderator of a presentation I gave at Solgum and Blenheim a couple of years ago, and I met him the night before, and he just asked me. He said, when I'm introducing someone, I like some sort of, slightly irrelevant comment that I can make, and something slightly interesting. And I thought, well, I'm fairly uninteresting, but I said, there was the time when I was wanted by Interpol for armed robbery of a bank. So he actually introduced me as the person who was one. I was actually one of the 10 most wanted criminals in New Zealand at the time, because I was the victim of identity theft. Would that have been 2 years ago now?
Yeah, yes, it was. And we were all delighted you remain out of jail.
Didn't do the crime, but. So we're on page 1.
Okay, so shall I start?
Yeah,
Shall I
I think
start
so.
now?
Yeah.
A quick overview of Bancorp Treasury Services. I did give a presentation, I think it was about 6 or 7 years ago. I think some of you may have been here, but there are quite a few who aren't. So I'll just give a very brief overview of what we do. Bancorp has been established since 1987. It has offices in Auckland and Christchurch, a subsidiary in Australia. We're the biggest treasury advisor in Australasia. We provide independent treasury advisory services. So we're not a bank. We don't provide any transactional or funding capabilities. We don't derive any income from the number of transactions you do or you don't do. It's purely on a retainer basis. So our only focus is to do what's best for you. We have about 160 retained clients in New Zealand who we advise, as we do with Ashburton District Council, on an ongoing basis. We also do one-off projects as well. We provide Treasury advisory services to around 35 local authorities. The northernmost one is Far North District Council. I think the southernmost one is Invercargill City Council. We'll have to go tomorrow. I think, well, no, we do have the most number of local authority clients in New Zealand, and it's actually our biggest, it's our biggest sector that we advise on. So, and it's local authorities is my specialty, so that's what I spend most of my time on. Ashburton District Council have been a client for about 11 years. We provide ongoing funding advice. This is now the next page, services to Ashburton District Council. And that consists of funding from the local government funding agency, the LGFA, and bank debt as well, although you only have bank debt for what's called a standby facility. We provide ongoing interest rate risk management advice, and that's how much fixed rate debt you should have, how much floating rate debt you should have, how you achieve the amount of fixed rate debt. There it is. Yeah. Perfect. Sorry, I think it's. Oh, it's both sides. Yeah. Just stay on that one, yeah, at the moment. And also, what our aim is to achieve an acceptable cost of funds for you. Now, that's not saying that we want to achieve the absolute lowest cost of funds. I mean, we could make it lower, but that comes with an attendant risk. So what we try and do is balance the risk against the risk that you're taking against having an acceptable cost of funds. And we also advise on financial market investments. We used to have money in the bond market, but the funds have been depleted now. And term deposits is preferable because they provide higher rates. We review the Treasury policy every 3 years, and we've just done that for the as part of the LTP process. Inherent in our services is that we write quarterly, as well as providing the ongoing advice on a day-to-day basis when we need it. And I've just been talking to Rachel about refinancing 15 million of debt. We provide quarterly reports that you've got a copy of that, and also we undertake to meet quarterly at the offices of Ashburton. Let's just go to the next one. Do you want me to go through this? I can give it in 2 minutes. So just these are the key economic indicators. Inflation was up 0.8% in the March quarter and up 1.5% for the year. GDP is actually down over the December quarter and 0.9% over the year. That means that we're in a technical definition of a recession because we had a negative quarter in the September quarter as well. We don't get the March quarter data until the end of June. New Zealand's about the last country in the world to get its GDP data out. Why? I'm not too sure of that, but it's expected that the March quarter will be a negative as well. I mean, it's the height of the tourist season, so it means that we'll continue to be in a recession. Unemployment, that just came out, I mean, this was yesterday when I did this, it was 4.9%. It's just come out slightly lower than expected. It came out this morning at 10:45, 4.7%. Retail sales are down 2.7% in the December quarter, but as we all know, house prices are going up. So those are the key economic indicators that the Reserve Bank looks at. And just looking at the growth projections around the world, New Zealand's one of the developed economies, but you can see that we did better in 2020. I'll just check something on this. We did better in 2020 than the emerging markets, but it doesn't look like going forward in 2021 that we will, well, the expectation is that it will be 5.1%, but New Zealand's only expected to grow by about 2%. The US is expected to grow by between 6 and 8%. China's expected to grow by 7 or 8%, although whatever China gives a growth projection, and then they always meet it. So whether or not it's true, I mean, there's a lot of doubt about the validity of the Chinese figures. So New Zealand will, while we did very well last year, I mean, while the developed economies went down 3.3, we went down 0.9, we will underperform this year. And this chart, it's one that we look at often because it's actually the barometer for longer term interest rates. So it's the US 10-year Treasury bond, which is the global benchmark for longer term interest rates, and the New Zealand 10-year swap rate. So the swap rate is, it's the bank rate, just think of it as the bank rate, it's slightly higher than the 10-year government stock rate. But you can see that we follow it quite closely, but then we had, you haven't got a laser pointer, have you? In August, where there was a dislocation, it's back in August last year, where the blue line New Zealand went down and the red the US went up, was when the Reserve Bank came out and gave a fairly strong indication that the OCR would go negative. So, and everyone was picking negative interest rates then, and then you just go along a little bit and there's a sharp move up in the blue line, and that's what happened over a day after the Reserve Bank came out in November, in the November monetary policy statement, and significantly dialed back expectations for a negative OCR. Since then, there's been no talk. There's no thought whatsoever to the OCR going negative. Also, the up move in rates coincided with increased inflation expectations, the rollout of the vaccine, increased global growth. But just in the last 2 months or so, you can see both of those rates have come down, as the thought is that maybe the vaccine rollout isn't going quite as well as expected, that there is going to be a lingering effect. We're getting the second and third waves of COVID, so rates have come back off. This is probably getting a wee bit technical, but it shows the yield curve in New Zealand. So down the bottom there is where it was in October. So the yield curve is an interest rate graph from 3 months out to 10 years. So each line is where interest rates were on a given day, from the 3-month rate out to the 10-year rate on a given day. And you can see down the bottom that in October, which roughly 6 months ago too, we were quite a bit lower than where we are now. And this is the graph out to going out to 2 years, and the longer rates have gone up. And that's actually keep going. That just shows the same thing, so I won't go on to that. And if you just go to the next one, Rachel. These are the expectations for the official cash rate. And the interesting thing is the dotted lines, they were where the projections were in October before the monetary policy statement came out. And with 3 of the big 4 banks expecting it to go to minus 0.5 and one of them minus 0.25. And then the solid lines are where they expect it now. So absolutely no, but they're not expecting the OCR to go any lower. In fact, one of the banks, BNZ, it actually is expecting it to go higher over the next year. This is going out to the second quarter of 2022. So there has been a very significant shift up in expectations for interest rates, and it caught everyone by surprise. Basically, I mean, I don't think anyone was projecting it that the turnaround would happen so quickly. Yeah, sorry. I won't go look. If you want to read that sometime, it's just what OCR borrowing rates are. It's a wee bit technical. Now these are the fixed rate hedging percentages that Ashburton that we're going to be moving to for Ashburton. They have been changed in the Treasury policy. We used to have hedging out, or you used to have hedging out 10 years. Now it's going out to 8 years, and we've slightly lowered the percentages in a couple of the time buckets. It used to be 0 to 2, 2 to 5, 5 to 10. Now we're 0 to 2, 2 to 4, and 4 to 8. So those are the minimum and the maximum amounts of fixed rate cover that you need to adhere to. And that's showing the so that's showing where you are with the new hedging bands, but also with the debt up to 70 million, which 70.6, isn't it? 70.6 million. You've got 62 million of debt at the moment, but we've got 15 million of refinancing coming up next week, and but you've got a $15 million term deposit, which was because you did what's called pre-funding, where you borrowed the money early, put it on term deposit. And how much did we make on that one, Paul? You make, sorry. 15, 20,000. Yeah. We did an earlier one a couple of years ago when I think it was, or last year, which was about $50,000. So we're actually borrowing for quite a long term, but we're putting on term deposit. You were putting it on term deposit and making a positive carry. So it just meant that, look, we might as well do it now, lock the rate in, and also have that positive carry. Now this is the new debt that we've just that you're going to acquire, and we're bidding in the tender in the LGFA in the May tender, and this is to replace internal debt. Is that right, Paul? So there's 23.6 million there. So we're getting 16.6 million using a fixed rate bond which matures in May 28. Now it was indicated to me that some of the councillors were quite keen to lock in have higher levels of fixed rate debt. So this does change it, and it gives you that higher level, but also we're having 7 million of floating rate debt. So the fixed rate bond is at a yield of 1.88%. The floating rate note, which matures in April 25, is at 0.75%. And this just probably just illustrates the sort of the dichotomy, really, that you can fix it at 1.88%, and you know that you're going to pay 1.88% between now and May 28. But with the floating rate note out to April 25, that's only at 0.75. And if you'd put that out to 28, it would probably be at about 0.9 if you'd done that. Problem is that this gets a wee bit technical, but the margin on the floating rate note stays the same, but it changes. The yield changes according to changes in the 90-day bank bill rate. So we just decided that, look, to give you more certainty, we took the majority of it on a fixed rate, but also you've got 7 million at 0.75. There is other debt that you've got in there, the commercial paper, at cheaper rates. The commercial paper's at, I think, 0.55, is it? 0.53 or 0.55. Yeah, and that's just for a 3-month term. So if we go for, so using those new fixed rate parameters that are they in effect now, or is it 31 July? They are now, yep. That, you can see the green line, which replicates the graph that I had earlier on. But with the new 16.6 million of fixed rate debt, the actual amount of fixed rate debt that you've got is indicated by the black line. Now, shall I quickly run through how the graph works, or? Yeah. Probably need maybe a laser pointer, but the grey area is your debt, so that's your core debt. And we are flatlining it. We could look at your future debt, but we've decided that we just use what the current debt level is. Well, that's the debt level 1. I've just rolled it forward to assuming it's next week, well, the end of May, when you've got this new debt. The red lines are the minimum and maximum amounts of fixed rate cover, and that was derived from that table I had earlier on. So the first grid supposedly is the 0 to 2 years, then it goes 2 to 4 years, and then it goes from 4 to 8 years. So you can see that you have lower minimum levels of fixed rate cover in each of the preceding 2 time bands. That's the bottom red line, and you have higher maximum levels of cover you can take as well, which is the top red line. Now, the reason why you have lower levels of fixed rate cover going further out is, one, there's not much certainty at all about what will interest rates be out in 25, 26, 27, 28. Also, you don't know what your future debt levels will be, and where councils around New Zealand have come unstuck, and luckily they're not any of our clients, but first they got future debt projections, which were based on LTP numbers, and I think most of you here know that a lot of councils don't spend their CapEx, as they've said that they do or projected to do, but they used the actual future debt levels in the LTP, and then they took the view that interest rates were going up and they had to have high levels of fixed rate cover. So what happened was that A, they didn't get the debt that they assumed that they would or projected that they would, and B, interest rates came down sharply. I mean, there have been quite a few cases of it being reported. I mean, Tasman was in the paper a couple of years ago where they had 106% of their debt covered. And Christchurch City is one. Auckland, they've got too much cover. Who's the other one? Palmerston North. Christchurch City's cost of funds, I think, is about, and they're advised by our opposition, by the way, is about, we have one main competitor in the space. They're a small accounting firm called PwC in the Treasury advisory space. But Christchurch's cost of funds is about 5.2. You're at 2.42, and you were at 2.15. It'll go down. I think Auckland City is in the 5s. Palmerston North's in the 5s. So that was where the problems came in. But luckily, you managed to avoid them, because we didn't look at future debt levels, and we didn't have high levels of cover, and we were actually down towards the minimum levels of fixed rate cover. So that's why your cost, 3% lower than Christchurch City, and I mean 3% on the debt level is quite a significant amount of money. Are there any questions on that graph just before I leave it?
Sorry, Miles. Oh, questions. Questions there, councillors? There's still another couple of slides to go, I know, but any questions on that policy? Yeah, carry on. There might be something there.
And that was the previous graph was your fixed, what we call the fixed amount of fixed rate debt and floating rate debt that you have. This is the actual maturity profile of the debt, all of the debt that you have, and you can see there's a significant amount in May in 2021. Well, that'll be alleviated next week when the May 21 debt matures, and then it's pushed out with the refinancing. We push it out further. If you just go forward to the next one, Rachel. So that's what the new profile will look like. So it's a lot smoother, But it does have a bit of a concentration in 28, but I mean, it's less than 25%, and I mean, I don't see that as a problem. And that was just recognising the fact that, you know, council did want higher levels of fixed rate cover, while 1.88%, you could get it cheaper, but it's giving you a lot of certainty for a long term. That's that one. And that is your cost of funds going back to March 14. This was derived from the March report, so you can see that you're over 6%. We got down to 2.15% in the December quarter, but you repaid some debt back, which was commercial paper, which was at 0.55. That pushed it up to 2.42. But when you get this new debt, that'll push it back down towards 2%. That'll be after next week. And I just thought, to finish off, a slightly light-hearted look at interest rates. So those are interest rates going back 5,000 years. And what this was actually a study done by the Bank of England governor in 2014. I know it's a wee bit out of date, but I think if you're going back 5,000 years, maybe 7 years isn't too significant. The darker blue line is short-term rates, and the sort of purpley line are the longer-term rates. What he actually what he derived from the study was that the aberrations that we had, I think it was about in the 1850s, I think that was the Industrial Revolution, then the lead up to the 29 share market crash, then the oil crisis of 77, and then we had that period of growth from 1985 onwards where it spiked up. And what he decided was that those were aberrations in the 5,000-year trend, and where we were now, or where we are now, is just a matter of mean reversion. And these rates are actually taken from the dominant era, the dominant dynasty of the time, and it goes back to the earliest one is the Babylonian Empire, and then there's the Byzantium Empire, the Roman Empire. So I won't go on about it too much, but I've got to be careful what I say. But going back 5,000 years, there was a guy called Hammadi in the Babylonian Empire who first introduced interest rates. And now the Babylonian Empire probably precedes the Me Too movement and gender equality. But a borrower could actually, and the presumption was the borrower was a male, he could actually pledge his wife and children and slaves as security. In very unusual circumstances, he could pledge himself as security, himself being the male, but if he did, it was limited to a period of 3 years. So it just goes to show that even in the Babylonian times, they realised that a male's usefulness didn't extend beyond 3 years. And I hope I haven't offended too many of the males in the room.
You were going okay until then.
But I mean, actually, where we are, I mean, while I treat it slightly light-hearted. I mean, if people say, well, interest rates aren't sustainable where they are, well, we're just back, as I said, we're just back to mean reversion.
Yeah. Thanks, Miles. There's a couple of questions coming up. I've got a couple first. There's a couple on the 15th of May. We've got two big loans, 15 million rolling off, and at 4.5s, 5.6s. That will make a big difference to our average rate, I would think. When they
it will push the cost of funds down. We have got 2 interest rate swaps commencing on that date.
Oh, already covered.
So that will, because we had to actually achieve policy compliance before that. So we take these interest rate swaps out, which converts floating rate debt to fixed rate in advance of when they're needed. But so the interest rate, the commencement of the interest rate swaps coincided with the maturity of the fixed rate debt. But it still will push the cost of funds down, and your debt level is going up as well. And I understand it's actually going quite a bit higher. So ironically, the more debt you have at the moment, the less it costs.
Yeah, and another question just on the term length. I think we're out to 8 years or 7 years, is it? The longest we've gone out.
It'll be going out to 2028, yes.
Yeah. So why wouldn't we not go out to 15, 18 years, push it out? I mean, the policy doesn't allow that, but you see no advantage in going longer term again?
I'm just getting the rates.
They obviously are higher.
Just to give you an example, the fixed rate, or say the fixed rate out that you're doing out to 28 is what, 1.88%. If we go out to April 29, it's 2.08. If you go out to April 33, it's 2.59. If you go out to April 37, it's 2.96. So it does start to get quite a bit more expensive, another %. And we've done some analysis on the benefits of doing quite considerably longer dated hedging, and there aren't any actually. I mean, anyone who's had longer dated hedging, and those are the examples that I gave earlier on, it's actually cost them. So we just think, we're trying to achieve a balance between keeping your cost of funds low but giving you a reasonable amount of certainty, and we sort of feel out that 8-9 year period is probably the maximum that it's appropriate to go to. And the other thing is you don't know what your future debt levels are going to be going out that far. I mean, actually one thing that is worth mentioning is Three Waters, because that could considerably reduce local government debt, but we don't know what form it's going to take. We don't know what, the presumption is that the water assets will be transferred over to the new entities, and then the debt associated with it will be transferred over. But we don't know the mechanics of it yet, and it seems fairly likely that your debt will reduce because of the three waters, but until we know how it's going to be constructed, most councils, or all of the ones we're dealing with, are just going on a business as usual case.
Yeah, because
until we know that,
we make that decision whether we go opt-in in November of this year, so we don't know whether we're in or out at this stage, so no decision there yet. Questions from Councillor Flynn?
Thank you. Yeah, looking at that 10 and $5 million debt which falls off in 10 days' time, we've been looking at that for quite some time to fall off, and I'm sure there'll be a celebration somewhere, saving $600K a year in interest. You're saying before going back to Byzantine times where you could pledge the wife and the kids and yourself. You've seen a bank guarantee lately? Nearly as bad. But the major point, though, is I was reading an interesting report this morning on the effect of Bidenomics, which is the new word, and what another spendthrift is, like the last idiot who was in the White House, what effect that is going to have on inflation, because they're already talking about, we know shipping rates have gone up, we know a lot of personal health insurance is rising rapidly, and a lot of other things are starting to rise rapidly as due to the hold-ups in the supply lines. How quickly will that rise in inflation affect central banks to start raising their OCRs quite rapidly?
there are some very good points there. The Reserve Bank Governor, while the market is expecting interest rates to rise, the OCR to rise next year, the Reserve Bank Governor came out about a month ago and said that he did not believe, I should go back one point. The Reserve Bank don't believe that New Zealand will get to its employment and inflation targets, which they have a remit between the Minister of Finance and the Reserve Bank Governor. They don't think they'll get there till 2023 or 2024. So what the Reserve Bank is saying, in effect, is that they don't believe they'll need to raise the OCR before then. But market pricing is actually having it rising sooner than that. And Adrian Orr came out about a month ago and said he does not believe that current market pricing is correct. Now that's a reasonably forceful comment, saying he doesn't believe that the OCR will need to go up. Rachel, can you get one of the charts back up, or
we can get it on our screens if you want it.
It's the chart of the 10-year. If you just go back, it's the chart of the New Zealand 10-year rate and the US 10-year rate. If you just go back to that.
Page 6 of the report.
So you can see that since November, the long-term rates have actually gone up quite considerably. Now what that is actually doing is that's one there, yeah. That's actually preempting increases in interest rates. So you can say that, and that was based on exactly the points you were making, is that inflation will pick up and economic growth will pick up. So that chart is preempting the actual increase in the rates, but we believe it might be slightly overdone at the moment, and rates have started coming off. The Reserve Bank are actually projecting our inflation, I think, later this year to go to 2.5, but then revert back to about 1.4 next year. So there's going to be a temporary blip up for the reasons that you said with the supply chain problems, the cost of shipping increasing. But the one thing that is actually suppressing inflation and has suppressed inflation for a long, for quite a number of years and will continue to do so is technology. Technology's had a huge impact on inflation around the world and has enabled the world to grow, but without inflationary impacts. I mean, just think of how much more efficient we all are in our jobs because of computers and how much cheaper electronic goods are. So I think that's probably the counter argument to that, is that yes, there has been an expected increase in inflation, and that's mirrored into current interest rates. We think it might be overdone, and there are, with some of the problems that we're seeing at the moment, might be transitory. But the news about the spendthrift with Biden is actually probably factored into market pricing already.
Diane?
Thank you. I was just looking on page 12 and 14 on the debt and cover, and I see we fall outside, the green line falls just outside the lower red line.
Yeah, that's the current one just in May, but then rolled forward. But then when we do when we have the new bond, the two new bonds, which we'll get on the 17th, that's denominated by the black line, then you're okay. You were policy compliant as at March, but just because of what we call the effective time erosion, where the green line intersects the red line back in about May 26, that was policy compliant back in March, slipped into non-compliance in May, but as I say, that will be corrected.
Oh, thank you. So what if you're outside that? Is that what Paul has called to as a policy breach?
Yes.
So what does that mean, in my ignorance? Is it a negative thing for our ratings, or?
No. I mean, as long as it's noted, as long as it's not too significant, then Fitch, who rate you, wouldn't take too much notice of it. But I mean, if there is a policy breach, I mean, sometimes there are ones because they're technical. They're usually short term, but in each quarterly report, if there is one, I don't think we have had one for a long time. It's just noted, and we ask council to note and sanction it. Then we normally would put in the report, what remedial action we plan to take.
Thanks.
Good, Carolyn.
My question is probably a little bit outside the scope of this report, but I noticed you mentioned we're more efficient in our jobs, but I noticed that our productivity, as per our GDP, as I read a review on about a month ago, our productivity in New Zealand is quite low. How does that impact on the forecasts and that? And you don't have any data on it, what our region would, what Mid-Canterbury would be?
No.
Productivity as per our local GDP?
No. I don't know. I don't know if NZIER or Burl would actually produce that information. But you're right. I mean, New Zealand's productivity isn't particularly good.
No.
And I mean, people used to talk about how migrants coming in was so good for the economy. Well, actually, all that happened was that the population grew, but GDP didn't grow that much. So it was actually negative for our productivity if you measure it by productivity per capita or per head of population. I'm not sure why it is that New Zealand is lower than a lot of the other countries.
That was going to be my next question. Do you have any?
I'm not sure. I haven't actually read anything which says why we are. Maybe it's would it be bureaucracy? I shouldn't say that here, but
I think our productivity will be rising because we haven't got the migrants here, and the people that are here are actually working harder and longer to fill the void that they filled. And you can only do that for so long before they burn out. And I'm sure there's some industries are getting close to that in some situations, but not for us to worry about.
I mean, there are shortages, in certain industries. I mean, fruit picking obviously is one, that's been in the news lately. There are certain jobs New Zealanders just don't want to do.
Yeah, and there was fruit not picked this year because of that. That was the lower value stuff, but obviously they chose which needed to be picked. Whatever you got. Any further questions? If not, thank you, Miles, for that very informative overview of our portfolio there. And thanks very much for all the work you do for us. We get these every quarter, and they're always interesting reading. So thanks very much. Well done. Thank you. Great. Could I have a mover and a seconder that we received that Bancorp report? Councillor Cameron, Councillor Lovett, all in favour, please say aye. Get carried. That takes us up to the end of the open part of the meeting. So call for a mover that we move into public excluded. Councillor Brown, Councillor Wilson, all in favour please say aye. Aye. Carried, thank you.